Alright, for today's double indie game review, we turn to two games, both very different about their sense of dream logic, with Cavern of Dreams and Noxia Somnia. Cavern of Dreams is a love letter to 3D platforming of the N64 era, with all the good and bad that entails. We play as Flynn the Dragon, who has found themselves in the Cavern of Dreams in order to rescue their siblings. And to do so, we must brave the cavern, find lots of MacGuffins, and deal with the most dreaded enemy of all time, an N64 3D platformer camera. Our gameplay here is on the Collectathon MacGuffin-thon side. There are three things you'll be collecting in each one of the game's very meaty worlds. You have kind of collectible cards, which are just there for bonus challenge, mushrooms, which are used to feed your siblings once you rescue them, and then eggs, which are, well, the siblings themselves. The siblings count as your kind of progression gate. When you get enough eggs, you'll unlock a new movement or ability, and then when you feed the mushrooms, you will get the power of love, which is the key, quite literally, in order to see more of the game. Now, the level design here is quite interesting. There aren't a lot of levels in this game, but each one is very big in terms of variety, level, and environmental design. There's a mix of platforming-based puzzles and some good old-fashioned adventure game puzzle logic here as well. You'll be able to find different shortcuts, different routes, and there's also secrets that will connect the various worlds together. There's also a final quote-unquote world that is kind of where you'll go to fight the big bad. Now, the difficulty of this one definitely involves the kind of movement tech that this game is built on. This is nothing like a Mario 64 or a very responsive platformer. Instead, there's a lot of momentum-based tech. Your dragon here, Flynn, is quite slow and doesn't jump all that well by themselves. But if you use a roll or any kind of air tech and hold it down, you'll build this kind of charge. And when you release it, you'll kind of shoot off like a firework running at high speed. There's also additional tech in terms of hitting the ground with your tail as you're jumping to kind of propel you forward as a super long jump. And the game store page does promote that you can see it get through a lot of the obstacles without any unlocks, but that is going to be on the difficult side. I would imagine this game would be really great for speedrunners in terms of breaking it and using the kind of enhanced physics to sequence break and just get all the way around. For everyone else, the difficulty in terms of the platforming, because of how kind of floaty it is, does add some frustration. Thankfully, there are no lives in this game. If you die, you simply restart in the same room you're in. And this game would probably be too frustrating if they went another way. Length, this one can take you a few hours. It's not going to be like a 10 to 20 hour long game, but if you're looking to get everything and see everywhere, it could take you some time. In terms of problems with this game, again, this is designed to emulate the N64 style. So if you did not like the likes of Mario 64, Banjo-Kazooie, and so on, Cavern of Dreams is not going to change your mind in the slightest. As I said at the start, this has all the good and all the bad of that design. I still enjoy this one. I find the character very charming, the story very wholesome, and the platforming to be good for what it is. So if you enjoy 3D platformers from this era and looking for a very solid modern retro indie take, then definitely check this one out. But if the idea of going back to an era where 3D cameras were even more jankier than they are now, then you may want to stay out of this dream. And speaking of that, we go from a dreamy platformer to a nightmare of horror with Noxia Somnia. In this one, we play as Tristan, who is trapped in a nightmare by a malevolent force that wants to kill him and harvest his energy. And to do that, they will submit him to all his failures and past nightmares. As a bit of a content warning, the game does deal with heavy topics including suicide, depression, and other points, and this is all handled with Tristan trying to get the strength needed to rise up and change his life for the better. As for our gameplay, it is a mix of kind of survival and action horror. Tristan gets several abilities including a taser flashlight, dodge rolling, and of course using a variety of melee weapons. The common enemies are going to be very simple to beat up. Dodge through them and hit them until they go down. The enemies will drop kind of soul shards, which are your experience, as well as just miscellaneous items that can be used at the shop to buy new stuff. Your experience will be used to add new passives, including some important ones like more movement speed and helping you in the dark. The kind of horror element in this one is that when you're in the dark, your stress level will build up, indicated by the number in the bottom left. When it gets too high, you will have a panic attack, which basically will just completely devour your health. You can use healing to kind of get around it, or items to remove the stress, but you will need to keep your light on in order to kind of calm it down. Now, the reason why you don't want to keep your light on is that the game features several sections where you're chased by the area's big bad, and the big bad detects you via movement or light. It will come after you, which will also raise your stress levels, and you're back into the dying position. It leads to some sections being very slow, as you're going to use the various corridors and rooms in order to kind of dance around it. At the end of the level, you will fight the boss. And as an interesting point, this kind of gets at what this game is trying to do. The bosses will always telegraph what their attack is going to be, enabling you to know ahead how you're going to deal with it. So, the thing about Noxia Somnia is that I feel like it's kind of caught between two masters. It wants to be a very slow, very survival horror introspective kind of game, but also wants to be hack and slash, dodge killing, kill 'em all style action gameplay. And both elements don't, I think, work as well as they should. The issue is that the combat itself is very basic. Most of the enemies, in fact, I think every enemy in this game can be defeated by hit, hit, dodge behind them, hit, hit. Even the bosses themselves kind of fall into that same pattern. A lot of the bosses also feel very damage spongy. There are passives you can equip to raise your damage, but even with them, it can still take a few minutes of wailing on them in order to knock them out. There are bonus collectibles and secrets you can find, but the level design itself can be very maze-like, again, by dream logic, and without a map, it can be hard to remember where certain things are, what you need. Now, the difficulty of this one is also a very interesting point. The game ships with 2 difficulties, and there's going to be a third kind of true hard mode difficulty coming after 1.0. Playing this on normal, as someone who's, again, accustomed to action design and survival horror, I found this to be on the easier side. And again, the game is trying to, I think, be between like an adventure game or story-driven, and again, having the survival horror action side of it as well. So this one is I think, a tough ask. If you're someone who's looking for either a faster-paced survival horror or a slower-paced action game, I would at least give this one a check. But if you're hoping for a game that goes all in on one or the other, then I'm not so sure this one is going to work for you. We're going to wrap up the reviews here. Cavern of Dreams was played with a retail key, and Noxia Somnia was played with a press key. Let me tell you your games for a future stream and video, please reach out. And with all that said, have a good night and peaceful dreaming. That's going to do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to do the YouTubing stuff people tell you to do. If you're interested in more of my thoughts on design, check out my books wherever they are sold. Visit our Discord and Patreon, and come back for daily discussions on game design here, and on game wisdom, where some of the art and science of games.